Hey, I'm Jake Lizio, and in this video what I want to do is show you how you can write music when the only thing you have to go off of is a bass line. One point that I've really tried to get across to my students and songwriters is that it's not necessarily about what you write, it's about what you do with what you wrote. A lot of bass lines are pretty boring in isolation, but if you put the rest of the band around it, it really stands out as something else. It's more than just the sum of its parts. So what I'm going to do is take a very simple bass line and then show you how we can transform that into 5 different genres of music. And we're going to do this using some of the music theory that I've taught on this channel and a few new concepts that I haven't taught before. But if you ever get lost or confused, just check the description because most of these things I'm mentioning, I have done videos on. So let's take a look at the bass line that we're going to use to turn into 5 different genres. It's extremely simple. It only uses 3 notes, the notes E, G, and A. And on the examples, I'll be doing it on the bass. For right now, I'll just do it on my guitar. But the riff sounds like this. E, E, G, A, G. 1 and 3 and 1 and 1, 2 and 3, 4 and 1 and 1. So it's just a simple riff in 4/4. It takes up 2 measures, and like I said, it only uses 3 notes. The notes E, G, and A. And when I see, okay, we're only using 3 notes, I think of all the scales that are out there that use just the 3 notes E, G, and A. E minor uses those 3 notes. E pentatonic minor, E Phrygian, E Dorian. There's lots of different choices here for us. And that's why I like simple bass lines, because imagine if I had 7 different notes going on in my bass line. Well, that's going to spell out a whole scale, and it's going to kind of lock me into a key. Right now, with this just only having 3 notes E, G, and A, I kind of can go anywhere. There's a lot of different choices to just use those 3 notes. But without getting too exotic, I think the good scale candidates that I'm going to be thinking of here are E minor, that uses an E, G, and an A. E pentatonic minor uses those 3 notes, and also E Dorian. So as I go through this video, those are going to be the 3 areas that I'm focusing on the most when I am thinking about scales. But we don't always have to think about scales, so let's get started into actually using this bass line and turning it into a genre. And I'm going to start by using some of the simpler genres, the one that require a little less music theory, and then we'll add more theory as we go on. What I want to do is start off by turning this riff into a metal song or some metal riffs. All I have to do is play my riff on my bass guitar. And now just add a basic rock drum beat. Next, I play the exact same bass riff, except on a distorted guitar instead. I could also try turning each note into a power chord. And then I filled in the gaps in between my power chords with some palm mutes. You could also try just chugging away in an E power chord. And then maybe bringing in a little bit of that riff. And lastly, we could add a little bit of that E pentatonic minor scale to create a variation of our riff. And hopefully you agree those riffs all sounded good on their own, so you could easily mix and match them to turn it into a full song. Next, let's go into the EDM realm and take the same idea and just put it onto a synthesizer instead. We'll add a kick drum to every quarter note and a snare to the 2 and 4 beat, and then a hi-hat on the offbeat. I added an extra layer of percussion, and I always like the energy that a tambourine can add. Next, I added some quick power chords on a synthesizer. And then another synth layer, this one just playing lots of 16th notes on our tonic E. So this gives us a nice groove with plenty of space to put in a lead line. I wrote this line using the notes of pentatonic minor on a plucky sounding synth and then added a liberal amount of delay. Now let's forget about scales altogether, and let's just freak out on an E note while pitch bending up and down. And now let's harmonize that a minor third above. Okay, now we'll talk about the blues. Part of working off of a bass line means giving yourself the opportunity to make some judicious changes to that bass line. A lot of blues is done with a swing feel or a shuffle feel, and my rhythm is done with straight eighth notes. So right now I'm doing 1 and 3 and 1 and 1. But if I just add a swing to that or a shuffle, it would sound like this: 1, 2, a 3, 4, a 1, a 1, 2, a 3, 4, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 1. And you can hear that sounds bluesier. Blues is often shuffled, not always. But I figured, hey, you know, this is such a small change to our bass line. Hopefully you'll let me get away with it, where it's not the exact bass line we started with. It's just the small variation where instead of playing it with straight eighth notes, we play it with a shuffle. But everything else will be the same. Now, in my rock/metal version, you can see I started replacing all those notes with power chords. But in this case, what we can do is replace all those notes with seventh chords. So instead of just an E note on the bass, I'll have the guitar play an E7 chord. For a G note, I'll play a G7 chord, and for A, an A7 chord. So just sliding around this movable seventh shape. This is something I had hinted at in my last video on writing with seventh chords. I said that if you take dominant seventh chords and just slide them around, you can get some really nice bluesy sounds, and here's a good example of it. So to build the track, I just started with my bass line. And then I replaced every note with a seventh chord. Then I programmed an organ to play those same chords. And then finally I was able to add a lead on top just using the E blues scale. Next, we're going to transform this bass line into a funk riff. And to do that, I'm thinking Dorian. Dorian to me has always got like a funky flavor to it, and these notes are already in E Dorian. So to kind of beef up that Dorian flavor, all we have to do is start adding in some actual chords. The chords of E Dorian would have an E minor in it, and a G major in it, and also an A major. And if I want to extend those into seventh chords, what I'd get is an E minor 7, I'd get a G major 7, and I'd get an A dominant 7. So I think that chord progression right there sounds kind of nice, even all on its own, and it should fit up nice and well with my bass line because my bass is playing an E note, so I can play an E minor 7 over that E note. When the bass plays a G note, I can play a G major 7, and when the bass plays an A note, I can play an A7. And all of those chords are diatonic to E Dorian, which is the same thing as D major, but we don't want to think about that. We want to think of E Dorian. So keeping those chords in mind, here's how I was able to develop that into a full funk section. I once again started with the bass, and then I found this old school hip-hop drum loop and filtered out the low end. Then I introduced a new snare and new kick drum. Then I added my guitar chords. And once again a tambourine loop because they're awesome. Next I added another guitar layer consisting of some percussive octave strumming. Next I programmed an organ to play the same chords that my guitar was playing. And now we've got a juicy groove section that's ripe for leads. I called up my good friend Roger Reupert and had him play me some funky trumpet lines, which are mostly derived from the E blues scale. So for this last section, I want to introduce a concept that I haven't taught before on this channel, and that's the idea of changing chords over a steady, consistent, static bass note. So that's called pedaling over a bass tone. And to do this, what I want to do is just show you 3 simple chords. We're having an E minor, A minor, C major, and E minor. So that's what it sounds like, all 4 of them in a row. And that sounds nice, but we can get a different sound out of them by pedaling them over the note E. So every single chord has an E on the bass. So for example, like here's an E minor with E on the bass. Here's an A minor with E still on the bass. now here's a C major with E still on the bass. And then back to E minor, right? Hopefully you can hear that sounds pretty different, and it has a different effect than just playing the chords in root position when you have that steady bass note. So that concept is what I want to apply to what we've got writing here. I'm going to have the bass just continue to plow ahead. It's just going to be doing E, G, A, just like before, nothing different. But these chords are going to have these long stretches of just an E minor with E on the bass, then a long stretch of A minor with E on the bass, and a long stretch of C. Now the reason I picked those chords is because they should match up with the notes in my bass line. My bass line is just E, G, and A. Well, what are the notes of an E minor chord? E and G. So I got 2 of those 3 notes right there. What are the notes of an A minor chord? A and E. Well, that's 2 notes of my bass line. And C major has an E and a G. Those are 2 notes in my bass line. So I believed that those chords would work pretty well on top of that bass line. And I figured as long as we just keep the bass line steady, we can sort through different chords and it might sound pretty cool. So to get started, what I did is once again start with just my bass line. And then I added drums again, except this time I added a little delay to the snare to add a spacey texture. Then I added in those synth chords, keeping everything pedaled over E. And as you can hear, this really darkens up the groove. I played around with different voicings on my guitar until I found some that I liked, and then added them on top with slow strums. Then I wanted to add some slidey, dreamy, delayed goopiness, but I couldn't find a slide, so I ended up using a battery instead, but it worked just fine. Lastly, I coated the entire thing in E minor guitar leads with lots and lots of delay. Like I said before, it's not about what you write, it's about what you do with what you write. And a lot of times you might write a little piece or a riff or a chord progression, and then the first thought that pops into your mind is, well, that's lame, that's dumb, what am I supposed to do with that next? And you throw away that and you go on to something else. But my point here is hold on to that stuff and try to play with it, try to make it work by surrounding it with the right players, with the right actors and the right instruments. And you might be surprised at how many of your bad ideas were actually good ideas that just needed to be seen in the right light. So I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you learned something. If you did like this video, you can thank my wonderful Patreon subscribers for making it possible. They've been sponsoring these videos for the last year and I wouldn't have been able to do it without them. So if you'd like to join them, you can. There's links below in the description. But if you can't do that, that's fine. Just like, subscribe, comment, and that's good enough for me. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.